I built this illegal nether portal in survival, and this farm gives 1 million pork chops per hour, and these are the 23 greatest achievements of the Minecraft community. And hey, as you can see from this number, we're getting painfully close to 6 million subscribers. It's so close we could hit it this week if you subscribe. So if you enjoyed that video, consider checking that red button below. It's free, and it helps out a ton. This is a nether portal, and this is a Pether Nordle. What's even weirder is that this is all possible in survival. The answer for all the weird blocks that you're about to see comes down to something called update suppression, which is when we have so many updates happening at once that it overloads the game that it can't update certain blocks like they're supposed to. And the way that we do that here is by having so many rails powered at once, and then the game forgets what it's supposed to update, and we get things like a half a wooden door, a half a bed, or some stuff that's even weirder. And while there are so many cool results that you can get out of this, I'd only recommend trying it using carpet mods, update suppression, crash fix, because otherwise you might just lose your world to a loop where it constantly crashes over and over. And something tells me that no matter how cool these things are, that just isn't worth it. Instead of a minecart track like this, try this instead. With the way that minecart's rails work, we can manipulate the physics in such a way so that when we get pushed by a piston, we actually end up going extremely fast on this line of rails. Sure, the end result does cost a lot of redstone, but when you see the kind of speeds that we're able to output here, I think that quickly makes it worth it. And plus, there's even different piston bolt designs that'll let us go upwards, diagonally, or even move mobs around as well. And that would be the reason why many technical Minecraft players use this as their go-to way to travel thousands of blocks in between their builds, especially when it works in the nether. Here's how to get Bedrock in survival, because strange as it may seem, it's actually possible to get the Bedrock item to drop when you break an end teleporter like so. Now, to grossly simplify what something like Psycraft has done here, we need a weird combination of teleporting thousands of blocks away from the end island, using a silk touch pickaxe to break a slime block, and then waiting a few seconds before finally the Bedrock drops from the end teleporter. Oh, and not to mention that we also have some rails here for some kind of update suppression as well. Really, if you want to learn the finer details, I recommend checking out Ilmango's video actually pulling this off, because as cool as it is to describe this feat myself, it's even cooler to see it done in person. By just flipping this switch, we're about to destroy thousands of blocks, and the reason for that is this perimeter making machine, better known in the community as a world eater. Now, TNT duplication's nothing new, but duplicating TNT on top of a flying machine that goes back and forth over an area can really start to see some results. And with a design like this one by Doc M, it doesn't take long to see some serious destruction happen. And honestly, my favorite part of this whole design might just be the ability to hop in this minecart and take credit for the destruction ourselves. Here's why you should be using armor stands in your item sorter, because with this design by Ilmango, we use dispensers and armor stands to figure out very specifically which items are stackable and which ones aren't. So while a normal item sorter wouldn't be able to tell the difference between armor versus a sword, this one can. And if you're playing in 1.19, this design got pushed even further through the addition of a lace, which does a lot to keep our chest from just ending up in a miscellaneous, not sorted pile. And for that, I'm thankful. This farm can produce over 1 million items per hour, which is a ridiculous number to wrap your head around. But through the help of glitched portals and update suppression, it's possible to get enough hoglins spawning through to the overworld that we get over 1,500 double chests worth of cooked pork every single hour. And I'm hungry, but that should be enough to even feed me. And if we go over to the nether side, you'll see that we have a row of glitched portals like this that make sure that every time that a hoglin spawns, it comes over to our overworld and gets cooked for our dining pleasure. But trust me, that makes it sound a lot simpler than it is to set up. With a few snow layers placed just right, we're able to trap a gas fireball and actually use it for our own functioning gassed cannon. Now, obviously setting one of these up is going to be pretty dangerous, but as soon as you get a gas trapped, then we just need to have it shoot its fireball into the middle of snow layers like this and a slab over top, and that'll keep the hitbox in place, and more importantly, it'll let us stand inside without taking damage. And from there, all we have to do is punch, and we have the full capability to launch these wherever we so please. Oh, and if you want to make this cannon even faster, just add in more ghasts. Though I'd be remiss if I didn't recommend having this minecart with an activator rail to get you on top, because after all, we're working with some pretty powerful explosives here. We don't want to take any risks in how you mount it. This is a flying machine, and this is a flying submarine. Since by using the same technology, user Dylan D was able to make this very realistic submarine that can cruise through the water with no issues. And while that alone is wild enough to experience, what really sells this to me is the little details. Like the fact that we're able to hop inside these minecarts for a quick little ride, or if we place TNT up on top of these blocks, they'll get pushed up with the soul sand bubble streams and explode any ships that are above us. Bombs away. Why do we place all these trapdoors on the skulk blocks? Well, while it seems strange at first, what we're actually able to do here is control the way that skulk flows through the blocks. And you'll see that if we kill a mob on top of this skulk catalyst. Since as this points out, having trapdoors flipped a certain way gives us a two-way street on how our skulk charges flow, which is not only pretty, but it could be helpful to redirect your skulk from a mob farm into a cobblestone generator so that you make sure that you make the skulk blocks where you actually want them. And really, I'm sure that's just scratching the surface for the many ways that the technical community will put this design to use. You've seen Sandiction trap the Ender Dragon, but here's how you do it yourself. After building up scaffolding the correct height of y equals 145, all we need to do is bridge over to the coordinates 0, and then add in obsidian and water source blocks. And then from there, as this user shows, when the Ender Dragon tries to perch back, it gets stuck in our water trap, and it's completely there for us to kill. Or to keep on display if you want to get 60 million views on your YouTube video. I mean, I could think of worse things to use the dragon for. Slime farms are nothing new, but making a slime farm that doesn't rely on slime chunks, but instead the swamp zone spawning mechanics, that's a whole other achievement. And as you see from this design, this is now possible only because of the 1.18 spawning changes that prevent certain mobs from spawning if there's a light level above 0. But because mushrooms emit a light level of 1, we can use that to spawn-proof an entire area so that only slimes spawn. And then, as soon as we go up to this platform way up in the sky, you'll see that sure enough, the slimes are spawning down there. You just might need to increase your render distance to actually be able to see it. Killing the wither's an achievement, and killing 4,500 of them in the next hour is going to be an even bigger one. Since with this user design, we have a fully operational semi-automatic wither killer / nether star farm. And sure enough, by placing down a row of soul sand like this and using pistons to set it up, all we need are some dispensers to spawn our withers underneath the bedrock, and then, with enough entity cramming, their health bars start to drop rapidly, getting us the kind of nether star results that we want. And at this point, the bigger problem's gonna be finding a way to get that many wither skulls to actually function this farm. But hey, there are other efficient farms for that as well. Why did we make our bee farm in the nether? Well, strange as it might be, by having these little helpers buzzing around in the nether, there's no day-night cycle, so they just work constantly. And then if we add in a chunk loader like this one, where every so often it sends an item through the portal so that the chunks don't unload, then we make sure that those bees legitimately work non-stop all the time, regardless of where we are in our world. And that'll be the best way to get all the honey blocks necessary for when you're building this kind of crazy redstone vault door. As soon as I pick up this wet sponge, I get another one that's already smelted, which, folks, isn't some trick or illusion. This is actually possible in certain versions of the game. The concept here is called item shadowing. Using the help again of the update suppression glitch, we're able to essentially link our inventory remotely with a completely different hopper system. And that way, these items get sucked out of our inventory and essentially get put back in completely smelted. But unfortunately, this got patched in 1.19, so I guess we have to rely on the lays to pick up our wet sponges. Watch closely, because if you blink, you might miss this one. Since by using a Ravager setup like this, we're able to launch ourselves over 1,000 blocks just like that. After building this user design, the steps are pretty simple. We move into the pressure plate while holding the block key, making sure that the fence gate locks us in place, and then after we block enough time so that the Ravager gets stunned, which you can tell by its head shaking around, then we quickly click this minecart, keep blocking, and then wait for it to hit us again, until just like that, we're shot hundreds of blocks away from where we started. Just make sure you have a safe place to land when you get to the other end. After all, you wouldn't want to die 1,000 blocks away from where you're supposed to be. Mob farms are nothing new, but a passive mob farm, that's something special. But if we use something like world eaters to get rid of all the other spawnable area in a place, then once we add in well-lit grass blocks into the middle of spawn, we guarantee that all peaceful mobs that are supposed to be spawning only spawn where we want them to be. And then we use a flying machine to push them over to the killing method and get ready for the next batch. And if you're wondering why we built it so low in the world, again, that's to increase the amount of spawn rates that we're gonna get, which is a hassle to build, but it's also just about the only reliable way that we're getting a constant automatic source of cows, pigs, sheep, and horses. So I think it's a worthwhile trade-off. I trapped 70 wardens in this one area, and the reason is that with all these wardens, no other hostile mobs are going to spawn around us. See, the hostile spawning in Minecraft works off something called a mob cap, which is that after a certain amount of hostile mobs are spawned, the game isn't going to spawn anymore, which means that if we get ourselves enough wardens and then use a note block so that they don't despawn, then we're technically still safe, but nowhere else in the server are more hostile mobs going to spawn. And after you build this, I'd recommend placing a chunk loader and getting immediately out of there, because having 70 wardens in one spot is going to mean 70 mobs that are trying to give you the darkness effect, which if you ask me is 70 too many. In certain versions of the game, it's possible to manipulate the random number generation system so that we can guarantee that lightning always strikes in the same place twice. As Razeworks and the folks in the ProtoTech SMP show off, we can use one of these RNG manipulation systems in tandem with a bed of hoppers to make sure that when lightning keeps striking in the same place, we eventually get the skeleton traps that we want to spawn. And there you go, skeleton horse farm, which seems like a lot of effort to go through for a skeleton horse, but considering you can't breed them, I guess this is the best we've got. And that's not the only thing we could do with RNG manipulation, and we'll see that later in the video. Instead of trading with your villagers in the overworld, you should trade with them in the end, for the simple reason that if you get a villager set up like this, and then use the end teleporter gateways, we're able to easily keep trading with the same villager without it ever timing out. And the best part about this user design is that we don't actually have to break Bedrock to do this, but rather we just flip the trap door, activate the water source, and then trade with the villager as we're getting teleported between the two different spots. That alone makes it completely possible to keep trading with this villager as many times as we want, since it bugs it out and it'll never have to restock. So while it might take some time to set this all up, this definitely could be a design that saves you time in the future. Instead of trading with piglins for infinite obsidian, we're going to use withers. Since with this wild design, we use a combination of trapped wither bosses and nether portals to essentially create infinite obsidian as much as we want. It's hard to notice while we're using it, but from the outside, the way that this works is that every time that we go through the portal, it generates a new set of obsidian for the withers to break. And as they shoot towards these snow golems that are trapped away so they never hit them, they'll only ever break the blocks that we generate by being AFK. So while this is obviously dangerous to set up, with not one, but 2 withers that could ruin the whole thing, when this machine gives you 3,000 obsidian per hour, it's an investment that pays off. Here's how to kill the ender dragon with just 1 arrow. By using this design, affectionately called the rail cannon, we use a combination of a power 5 bow plus explosions to supercharge the amount of damage that we're about to do. And then once the dragon spawns in, it'll instantly be killed once it respawns. Because folks, this 1 arrow is capable of dealing 1,200 points of damage, which means that the only way that you're capable of surviving this is with a totem of undying. And while that's a lot to take in, when you see this thing in action, it really does speak for itself. By using RNG manipulation, we can guarantee that we get the most out of our fortune pickaxe every single time, which means that instead of averaging 2.2 diamonds per ore that we break, we're getting 4 diamonds every single time. And while the systems that make this happen are more complex than I can go into, I think this is the prime example of you gotta spend a lot to make a lot. And when you get the maximum amount of redstone every time that you break an ore, investing this much just seems like a drop in the bucket. Here's how you get a command block in survival, or a spawner, or an end portal frame, or really anything, by using a combination of some insanely complex techniques, such as population manipulation, save stating, falling block mechanics, instant tile tick, instant fall, async chunk loading on top of everything else. We can put those all together and get literally any block that we want inside of survival mode, which is definitely a lot to do, but just picture the amount of bragging rights that you get when you show off these in your next museum. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?